How does the food you eat contribute to your health? Do supplements help prevent disease? For the past 25 years, the Linus Pauling Institute has served as a world-renowned research center at Oregon State University. Our mission is to promote optimal health through cutting-edge nutrition research and trusted public outreach. We use a synergistic strategy, connecting several scientific fields to bring a better understanding to dietary components and the role that they play in obtaining optimal health. We provide that information to the world, allowing people everywhere to live longer, better lives. Welcome to the Linus Pauling Institute's webinar series.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Linus Pauling Institute's webinar series. This is Aging Well and Optimum Health, the Role of Micronutrients, a webinar by our own director, Dr. Emily Ho. My name is Dr. Alexander Michaels, and I am the Communications Officer for the Institute. I will also be the moderator for the webinar today, which is our final webcast of 2023. If you haven't seen any of our other webinars this year, I suggest you check them out when we are done here today. We've had a webinar on vitamin C, another one on the life of Linus Pauling, and a third one on fruit fly research in Parkinson's disease. Today, we're going to have a webinar all about micronutrients and some of the research, and aging and micronutrients, and some of the research conducted here at the Linus Pauling Institute that helps us all get towards optimum health. We have you here for about an hour. We hope to wrap things up around noon today. And like other episode or parts of our webinar series, Dr. Ho will give a presentation for the first half of our time today, and then we'll open this webinar up for a Q&A session. I will talk more about the Q&A session after the presentation, but you can add those questions to the Q&A using the button below, and you can do that anytime you want, including now. And we'll try to get to as many of those as we can. So let me ask Dr. Ho to turn on her camera. And because I've introduced Emily in almost every single webinar over the last 3 years, I don't feel like I have to go into too much detail. But as I said, Dr. Ho is the director of the Linus Pauling Institute. She's been giving our annual end of the year webinar for the last 3 years. If you look back on our YouTube channel, you can find her previous webinars that focus on the big areas of research, which is zinc and broccoli and cruciferous vegetables and precision health. Today, we're going to talk about another theme that runs through Emily's research and part of the lifeblood of the Linus Pauling Institute, and that is optimum health. Not only what it means for you as you get older, and the role of micronutrients in achieving your best health. And so thank you, Emily, for talking with us today. And without further introduction, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alex, for the introduction. Welcome, everybody, to the webinar today. Scrolling through the names, it's nice to see lots of familiar names joining us, some new ones as well. We've got a lot of people here, though. Last I checked, we had actually over 1,300 people signed up for today's webinar. So I'm glad that you're so interested in the topic. Without further ado, let's get my presentation slides up.
All right, well, first of all, thank you all for being here. As many of you know, the mission of the Linus Pauling Institute centers around enabling individuals at every life stage towards optimal health. My goal for the next 25, 30 minutes is to help frame the role, especially of the micronutrients in achieving optimal health, especially as we age. And we'll play a particular focus on some very specific micronutrients that need a little bit extra special attention, especially in older adults. I'll provide some of the current data and also talk a little bit about some of the challenges and opportunities for research to consider for the future. So just to frame this conversation, now more than ever in our history, our nation's health has emerged as our nation's highest priority. We understand at the Institute that we really need to be more proactive rather than reactive to really truly improve the health of our nation and of the world. On top of that, We also know that in less than 10 years, the number of older adults is projected to increase by almost 18 million people. This means by 2030, 1 in 5 Americans is projected to be older than the age of 65. So for the first time in our history, older adults will outnumber children for the first time. This is going to have massive impacts in terms of the health of our nation. This aging tsunami may cause the rates of all these diseases listed here to skyrocket and has the potential to totally overwhelm our healthcare system. So again, we really need to think about being proactive rather than reactive in our health. And there's a critical need to help the population get ahead of this, and a critical need to act now to find solutions to help optimize our health across the lifespan. We at the Institute strongly believe that nutrition is a big part of the solution, but it's also a little bit complicated. So as we know, a strength at the Institute is the discovery of factors that help push the balances towards optimal health. And when we talk about healthy aging, it's not just focusing on research with the elderly. It's not talking specifically only about longevity. It's not about just living longer. It's about living better longer. This concept of health span, which I'll talk about in a minute. And when we think about optimal health and living better longer, some of that is staying free of disease. So looking at how we prevent disorders like cancer, metabolic disease, neurodegeneration, frailty. But it's also more than just stopping chronic disease processes. It's also optimizing systems and making sure that we can live well as well. So things like our mental capacity, our cognition, and our focus. It's also about optimizing things like our immune system to make sure that we can be resilient against stresses, infections, also looking to help prevent things like chronic inflammation as well. And all this together helps us develop a system that again helps us live better longer. So this concept of health span is a little bit new. We have always known that Dr. Pauling was way ahead of his time. And in the 1980s, he published this book, How to Live Longer and Feel Better. And this is really what we're trying to do at the Institute. Again, focusing on how do we help individuals, especially through nutrition, live better longer. So this concept of not just putting years to your life, but putting more life into your years. So again, you can live the best, highest quality of life you can for the longest period of time, and look at improving your health span, not just your lifespan. So when we think about nutrition and health, one of the challenges is that many of our current recommendations for our nutrition are based on essential health. So looking at, for example, with vitamin C, preventing deficiency syndromes like scurvy. We can do better than that, though. The levels of nutrients that we need to help for optimal health may be different. And some of the analogies that I like to give is it's kind of like your car. I have a 16-year-old in my household right now, so we talk about cars all the time. And just being barely above empty, so prevention of overt deficiencies, is really not the best way to have an optimal car functioning. It's not the best way to have your body optimally functioning. We need to look at moving the field forward, and we're getting there in terms of what are the levels of nutrients that we need to optimize. So what are the levels that we need to help prevent some of those chronic disease processes? Also, what are the levels, not just thinking about disease, that we need to optimize our systems so they're the most resilient to stresses, so you're able to deal with the things that come your way. One of the other challenges is that the path to optimal health and what is optimal for each individual or population may differ. Another car analogy. So this is my car. For any of you who know the Pacific Northwest, the Subaru is one of the most popular cars here in Oregon and the Pacific Northwest. And I have also bought into this wanting a Subaru. I want this car is optimal for me because I like it. It's fairly fuel efficient. It's got a high safety rating. It's an all-wheel drive, so I can get up to the mountains to ski with my kids. It's got a lot of capacity to put all our camping gear, all the sports gear as well. So it's just for me and where I am at my place at the moment. This is one of my optimal cars. However, if you ask my husband what is his optimal car is, and I'll show you what his car is. So this is his car. He is a die-hard muscle car fanatic. So things like fuel efficiency are not on his high priority list in terms of an optimal car. And again, this kind of just exemplifies, depending on where you are, depending on who you are, what is optimal for you may differ, and something to consider in terms of how do we understand what optimal nutrition is for you is some of a challenge. And we'll talk about that. We also want to look at potentially in the future, how do we enhance as well? So thinking about the power of nutrition in health span, some of the earliest work that substantiated the role of nutrition was really exemplified by looking at aspects of calorie and dietary restriction. And there have been many studies that have been able to clearly demonstrate if you lower the number of calories, you see a dramatic increase both in lifespan and in health span. And this has been demonstrated in many preclinical models, from yeast, invertebrates, and also mammals, as shown here. The issue is in humans, the impact of diet restriction is a little bit less clear. You also notice from the previous slides, the level of diet restriction that has benefits are fairly high, and translation to human diets has some logistical and quality of life issues as well. But it's not only levels of calories that seem to make a difference. It's also clear that diet quality also matters. And there's been an equal amount of research in people that have been able to establish that consuming a high quality diet is also very well associated with healthy aging. So this is studies that have been done looking at dietary patterns within individuals, and high quality diets. So in here, HEI are the healthy eating index. So if you have a high healthy eating index, that's indicative of a higher quality diet. And individuals that consume high quality diets versus low healthy index foods appear to have a decrease in mortality and decreased lower mortality and lower incidence of some of these chronic disease states. So what makes a high quality diet? One of the biggest aspects of a high quality diet is that they supply critical micronutrients that our bodies need to function. This is an example in terms of looking at how the US does in terms of micronutrient content. And what these bars show is percent of population that are not meeting the average requirements for our micronutrients. And you can see on the bottom, I know this may be hard to read, are many of our essential vitamins and minerals. And the short answer is that many of the population within the United States are not consuming a high quality diet and are not consuming enough micronutrients. And what's interesting, and I'll show you some data later on, that even with a perceived healthy diet, there are shortfalls in these vitamins and minerals that our bodies need. And especially as we age, it can become more difficult to get the full complement of vitamins and minerals that your bodies need. So there are some specific micronutrients, especially as we age, that we need to pay some closer attention to. So here are some examples of micronutrients, both vitamins and minerals, that tend to be more susceptible to these shortfalls, especially as we age. And the consequences of these shortfalls are multifold. So many of these vitamins and minerals play essential roles in various aspects of our cellular metabolism. And shortfalls in these nutrients could have impacts on things like bone health, immune function, bioenergetics, mitochondrial function. Many act as antioxidants and also help with things like wound healing, again, our immunity, our cognition as well. So deficits in these key nutrients can have multifold effects. In addition to these cellular systems being impacted, there are certain conditions that shortfalls in these micronutrients can predispose, especially an older individual, to things like anemia, again, that immune deficit, called immune senescence, chronic inflammation, and also bioenergetic deficits, especially related to the mitochondria. These together can cause an increased susceptibility to disease processes like neurodegenerative diseases, chronic infections, frailty, and osteoporosis. So ensuring you get a full complement of some of these micronutrients, and I'll highlight again, we have about a dozen that in particular we feel should be paid more close attention to, especially as we age. I also want to highlight one of the big determinants of healthy aging is resilience, especially to things like infection, which especially over the last few years has really been at the forefront of many minds. And we really need to think about how can we optimize our immune system. And as we age, we know that there are deficits that happen in terms of our immunity, and it's multifold, where we have both systems that appear not to be working as well. So we tend to have a decrease in some aspects of our immune system that causes us to be more susceptible to infections, less responsive to things like vaccines. But we also have some components of the immune system that are overactive as we get older. And this in particular leads to chronic inflammation. This inflammation can have a multitude of effects on our cellular systems in terms of dysfunction through oxidant stress and other pathways as well. In terms of immune function, the Linus Pauling Institute does have a recommendation in terms of about a dozen micronutrients and some other natural compounds to really be critical in terms of helping maintain your an optimal immune system. As I go further, a lot of these micronutrients overlap with the micronutrients that we recommend in terms of paying closer attention to as we age. But there are both vitamins, both water soluble and fat soluble vitamins, like vitamin A, D, E, and also some of the water soluble, some of our B vitamins and vitamin C, some of our minerals like zinc, iron, copper, and selenium, and also docosahexaenoic acid, so one of our omega-3 fatty acids. The reason why we recommend many of our nutrients, when we look at our immunity, it's highly complicated and there's many different systems. I know this is a really complicated slide. This is from a review article from an international team that some of the Linus Pauling Institute faculty, including myself, we're involved in that really outlines those nutrients and where they fit. If you're interested in this, here's the reference. But again, there are multiple systems within our immune system and multiple nutrients that play a role in different aspects. So again, it's not necessarily just one thing in terms of optimizing our immune system. In terms of my research area, and this is something I talked about last year as well, but just to highlight again, we also know in particular that aging is associated with a reduced zinc status. So when we're looking at a population that's susceptible to zinc deficiency, the elderly are certainly in that boat. Many people have been able to show that, especially if you're over the age of 60, over 60% of men and women do not get enough zinc in their diets. And that's coupled with some age-related deficits in terms of being able to absorb zinc as well. So it's a little bit of a double whammy that as you get older, you tend to consume less zinc, but you also appear to absorb and utilize it not as efficiently as well. So your susceptibility to zinc deficiency, and where that's important is that zinc, again, is a big component in terms of your immune system. Again, the immune system is highly diverse and lots of different components to it. Barrier function is one, the innate immune or our general defense systems, and then our acquired immune systems that are more specific defense. And the bottom line is zinc is required for all of these functions. Highlighting again some potential impacts that we've been able to show in some studies, preclinical studies using young and old mice. So either 2-month-old mice versus 20-month-old mice, which are kind of equivalent to a young adult versus over 65 individual. That we found that despite giving these mice a zinc adequate diet, so what we think may be optimal for them, these mice looked like they're zinc deficient. By giving them a zinc supplement, we were able to restore zinc levels. We also noticed that the older animals had a high level of chronic inflammation. So interleukin-6 is an inflammatory cytokine, and we see this big increase in inflammation. Again, when we supplement the older individuals, mice with zinc, about 10 times higher levels, we can restore zinc levels back to normal. And importantly, we're also able to limit the inflammation. So by restoring the zinc levels in these older mice, we're able to help correct this age-related immune dysfunction and prevent this inflammation. So for zinc, again, it plays a critical role in terms of maintaining a healthy immune system. We also, so it's critical to avoid zinc deficiency. Unfortunately, we don't have a great sensitive test for zinc status. My webinar from last year talked about this. So using a multivitamin, multimineral supplement that contains zinc is definitely a great idea to help maintain zinc status. So we typically see in most supplements 10 to 15 milligrams, which meets the RDA for zinc as a good level to look at in terms of your multivitamin. But you want to make sure you don't go over 40 milligrams per day. Zinc itself is not very toxic, but it can compete out with some of the other minerals. So speaking of multivitamins, we've also been able to show the power of taking a multivitamin, multimineral in terms of aspects of health span. So this is a study done by one of the Institute's researchers, Dr. Fritz Gombart, as well as some other collaborators within the Institute, to really look at the impact of a multivitamin, multimineral supplement on immune function in older adults. These were a relatively healthy population of men and women, all over the age of 55. And they were given a daily multivitamin, multimineral for 3 months. And then we looked at some immune parameters within this population. This is an example of the supplement that they got. So it contains many of those nutrients in that foundations that I showed you earlier. So both vitamins, fat fat soluble, water soluble, and also some minerals. And what we found was, first of all, people who got the supplement compared to people who didn't. So the placebo are people that got a placebo pill, that we could increase the status of some of the individuals. So here's looking at zinc, here's looking at vitamin C, but not all the nutrients were able to show an increase. But importantly, we were, in terms of disease states, especially relative to immunity, we're able to see some benefit. So the multivitamin supplementation helped decrease cold and respiratory symptoms in these individuals. Again, showing just very simple supplementation of vitamins and minerals had a major impact. We've also done some other studies with older adults looking at multivitamin, multimineral supplementation. So in this study that was just published this year, a general multivitamin, multimineral was given to a population of older men. All were over the age of 67. And in general, they were self-reported as healthy individuals that had self-perceived healthy diets and tended to be active. So a relatively again, healthy older adult population. In this case, the supplementation was a little bit longer, 6 months in time. This research was led by, again, one of our LPI researchers, Dr. Hagen. Again, a full complement of those micronutrients that I had mentioned previously in terms of optimizing health. Again, not anything too special, just a general multivitamin, multimineral. One thing that I wanted to point out, even though this was a self-reported healthy population, the number of potential micronutrient shortfalls this population had was fairly high, even though they considered themselves to be consuming a healthy diet. So here, 100% of the individuals were consuming below the recommended levels for vitamin D, for vitamin E, for choline, for many of the minerals as well. So again, even though you think you're eating a healthy diet, there are often shortfalls in these critical micronutrients, and taking a multivitamin, multimineral is just great insurance to make sure that you are meeting your needs in terms of micronutrients. What this next diagram shows is the changes in status. So we measured blood concentrations of the micronutrients. The participants, so this is called a heat map, and turning green and color saturation are indicative of stronger change. And the biggest thing to note here is that we were able to show people who took the multivitamins did increase levels of those micronutrients in their blood and urine, whereas there was either a decline or relatively no change in the placebo group, which is not surprising. The one thing that we did look, though, is at functional changes and the impact of the micronutrients on some of these functional changes that are relatively important, especially in healthy aging. So our mitochondria are vital organelles that coordinate the energy conversion within our bodies and our cells. They help take our dietary fuels, like our macronutrients, and convert them into usable metabolic energy. Many of our vitamins and minerals exert their effects by acting on the proteins and enzymes that coordinate these responses. So deficits in our micronutrients can potentially have a big impact on mitochondrial function. We also know that during the aging process that the mitochondria are a system that tends to start to decline. And the decline of our mitochondria has, again, multiple impacts in terms of cellular function. from bioenergetics to oxidant stress to chronic inflammation. So maintaining mitochondrial health is quite critical in terms of optimal health and our health span. And again, making sure that you have adequate micronutrients is something that's very critical in terms of helping maintain that mitochondrial function. So what the researchers in this paper did was look at mitochondrial function, looking at whole cell energetics, and what the researchers found was that individuals that got the multivitamin, multimineral, were able to preserve their mitochondrial function, in contrast to the placebo group, which saw a steady decline in mitochondrial function over time. So again, showing the power of these micronutrients to help maintain optimal function of systems that we need to be thinking about in terms of optimizing our health span. So looking at the micronutrients that we need to pay close attention to, this is what the Institute recommends in terms of the micronutrients that tend to have susceptibility to shortfalls, especially as we age, and are clear foundations in terms of optimizing your health and potentially improving your health span. So again, there are vitamins, are water-soluble vitamins, like our B vitamins here, vitamin C, some fat-soluble vitamins like vitamin D, vitamin E, vitamin K, and our minerals as well. So both macro minerals and trace elements as well. The Institute is working on creating in the new year a new pamphlet in terms of clearly laying this out. So keep an eye out for that in the coming year. Bottom line, think about micronutrients in terms of healthy aging, and these in particular are some of the micronutrients that the Institute recommends with the levels here as well. All these slides will be available for you later on after the presentation for future reference as well. The last thing that I want to talk about is what is really holding us back in terms of really realizing optimal health as we age. And I touched upon some of these just briefly, but I want to emphasize this in terms of future research. We really do need better biomarkers of nutrient status to be able to identify people earlier in terms of these susceptibilities to shortfalls. Some of our micronutrients have terrible biomarkers, and we really need to advance this so we have better ways to gauge where your shortfalls are. We also need better biomarkers for health span and optimal health. Again, looking at just prevention of deficiency, I don't think is enough. And looking at other ways that we can look at function, whether or not it's mitochondrial function, immune function, maybe ways that we need to look at in terms of identifying our recommended levels. And the last thing is it's just extremely complicated. As I'd mentioned, optimal health is different depending on who you are. To really realize the potential of health span and healthy aging, we really need to realize it's not a one-size-fits-all. And we need to better integrate the complex biology of all these internal and external factors to make them our own. We've done a lot of advancements in terms of measuring stuff, but there's still some significant barriers in terms of putting all this data together. And again, thinking about biomarkers, and thinking about how to integrate all this data so we can better know what is better for you is still on the forefront and a direction that research needs to go. And it's getting there, but there's still a lot more that needs to be done. The bottom line is take home from inspiration of Dr. Pauling, the power of nutrition to help us live better longer is what we're trying to do. And optimum nutrition is truly the medicine of tomorrow. The last thing, I pointed out resources through the presentations. I wanted to remind you as well to visit our website. There are several other webinars on specific micronutrients and other bioactives. If you are not on our newsletter list, make sure that you're on it. Either the mail version, we also have a new digital version that's coming out on a semi-regular basis as well. Again, check out our Micronutrient Information Center as well. Some of those fact sheets that I presented throughout the presentation are there as well. Keep an eye out for new webinars that we're going to have in 2024, especially mark on your calendar Linus Pauling Day, February 28th, where we'll have some webinars, our first webinar of 2024 as well. So with that, I will stop the presentation and take some questions. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Emily. That was a wonderful talk. I'm glad we were able to highlight our studies here at the Linus Pauling Institute a little bit more. And I certainly love hearing about our clinical trials. We have a lot of questions coming in right now at the end of the presentation, and we're going to move into the Q&A section in just a little bit. But as I continue, go ahead and keep typing in your questions as I continue. But while I'm on the topic of the Q&A, I should say that the Linus Pauling Institute is not a medical institution. So the types of questions that we will take are about medical matters are somewhat limited. And if you ask about supplements, please be aware that we're not going to be recommending any brand name supplements. And lastly, our questions today are going to be kind of limited to micronutrients, which is vitamins and minerals. So if we can touch a little bit on other nutrients, but we're going to try to stay on track. And before I get to the first question for Emily, I'm going to mention some additional information that may complement this webinar. Our research newsletter. Our research newsletter is coming out this week, hopefully. The print version will hopefully be hitting people's inboxes, email inboxes, or print version your mailboxes this week and next week, and then the email version will also be coming out this week. And on the cover of that is the multivitamin trial in older men that Emily was just talking about. So if you want to hear more about that trial, some of the details are there. Of course, you can also email us for any other details that we can't cover here in today's webinar. And if you haven't signed up for our webinar yet, you can do so at lpi.oregonstate.edu. Okay, that plug put in there. I'll go to the questions. So the first question I've got, Emily, and there are a lot of questions streaming in, so I know we're not going to be able to get to them all. I'm sorry, guys, but we only have until noon. Talk about micronutrient synergies or micronutrients that you should avoid taking together. I guess we're talking about a supplemental form here, but what's good to take together? What's good to avoid?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I guess, first of all, there's very few micronutrients that you can't take together. You think about foods, they have a whole complement of micronutrients in them as well, so you're taking them together. With that said, though, there are a few things that potentially can compete, especially if you're taking high levels of supplemental nutrients. So zinc is a good example. If you take really high levels of zinc, it can impair and interfere with copper absorption and iron absorption. But generally, if you're consuming most of these micronutrients at the recommended level, there isn't much worry in terms of them competing. There's definitely a lot of evidence that they actually work together well. So calcium and vitamin D work well together, vitamin C and iron absorption, they work together as well. So, but there's very little concern for the most part in terms of canceling each other out, except for at those very high levels.
Right. And it's kind of a related question, but how do minerals work with vitamins? I guess this is more of in the cell. Like, do minerals kind of make enable vitamins to work better?
Yeah, no, that's another great question. So, two parts to the question, I guess. So first, again, if you remember back to that really complicated immune function slide, when you think about our bodily systems, there's multiple things that are going on, multiple pathways, multiple enzymes. So the vitamins and minerals tend to work together in different parts of systems, whether it be the immune system, the mitochondrial system. When you even think about antioxidants, some vitamins act as direct antioxidants. The minerals act as cofactors for enzymes that are antioxidants. So together, they become your antioxidant power. So that's one way that a lot of our micronutrients work together. But there's also a lot of our minerals act, again, as cofactors in enzymes. And our vitamins require enzymes to be produced and to be metabolized as well. So there's a lot of ways that the minerals, for example, may help action of the various vitamins, and sometimes vice versa as well, through that cofactor function.
Okay, I'm looking at some of the other questions that are coming in, and there's some details about the multivitamin trial that I will get into in just a minute. But one of your earlier slides showed shortfalls in the American diet. Can you talk about potassium? Why is potassium so low? Like, why are we not reaching our goals?
That's another great question. So potassium is one of our, I guess, salt minerals. Sodium is the other one that we think about as kind of the bad mineral, and potassium is a little bit complementary to it and is the good one that helps. It's associated with better blood pressure, cardiovascular outcomes as well. The big difference is foods that contain potassium tend to be things like our fruits and vegetables. Bottom line, fruits and vegetables are a great source of potassium, and it's a major source of potassium. And unfortunately, Americans do not consume, in general, a lot of fruits and vegetables. Hence, they're low in potassium. They're low in many things, magnesium, vitamins and minerals, as well, as a result of that low fruit and vegetable consumption.
And, one of the things that we talk about a lot is, we don't recommend people necessarily taking potassium supplements to try to reach that potassium level. It's better to eat the fruits and vegetables, not try to supplement for that.
And that pretty well goes for all the micronutrients, food first. And again, there are some of the micronutrients that are more at risk for some of these shortfalls. So to consider food first, a healthy diet, and then take a multivitamin, multimineral to act kind of as insurance to ensure that you're getting what you need.
Yeah, actually, the next question was kind of in that line. So we're talking about, you talked about zinc, but someone also asked about magnesium, because blood markers of those minerals aren't very helpful most of the time. Should we supplement with those to try to make sure we're getting adequate to the RDA? And honestly, you kind of already answered the question, which was, food first, supplement later. But what are your views on supplements with magnesium and zinc? Ones that are very difficult to tell if we're getting those.
Yeah, as I'd mentioned, there are several micronutrients that there isn't a great test in terms of identifying shortfalls or deficiencies. Zinc and magnesium are one. Calcium is also in that, where blood levels don't really reflect what's particularly going on in your body. So for those, it is important to be getting that. The RDA at least. For magnesium, as I'd mentioned, I definitely am on the stance of food first. So magnesium is another one of these things. So magnesium is actually a part of chlorophyll. So green stuff has a lot of magnesium. So start off with consuming green stuff to get that magnesium. But again, because it is one that tends to be a little bit more susceptible to shortfall, taking a multivitamin that has magnesium probably isn't a bad idea, just to ensure you are getting that RDA.
And most likely, if it's got magnesium, it's also got zinc.
Correct.
So you flashed it on the screen briefly, and I'm going to remind everyone these slides are going to be available for everyone. So I know a lot of people said, I want to see that slide again. We'll get you a copy, don't worry. The recommended levels of the micronutrients, besides the slide that you showed, what other places can people find the recommended levels of what they should be getting?
Well, first resource, you can always head to our website, the Micronutrient Information Center, pick your favorite vitamin or mineral, and it's all laid out there as well. Another thing that you can do is look at your food labels. There's a daily value level that's basically the percent of the RDA as well, with the caveat that the RDA sometimes, our current RDAs change a little bit based on lifespan, and that daily value sometimes isn't fully accurate to various life stages, other systems as well. So going back to the zinc example, for example, with zinc, protein sources are good forms of levels of zinc. But if you look at a food, a plant-based food, the daily value will have a number. But if you only eat vegetarian foods, you may not absorb as much of it. And that daily value doesn't represent that as well. So again, the daily value is a good guide, but it's not an absolute.
Yeah. And of course, the website not only has the RDAs listed for all the age groups, but we also have a specific page on the Micronutrient Information Center for older adults, which is where that table that you showed, all that information comes from. So
yes, absolutely.
But let's switch topics slightly about immunity and vitamins and minerals for immune system. Which ones should we be talking about there? And are there any good ones for kind of regulating autoimmune issues?
So it's a complicated answer, I guess, and I'm trying to figure out how to concisely talk about this. Again, our immunity is pretty complicated. There's definitely kind of a dozen micronutrients that we recommend in terms of optimizing your immune system. Some of the ones that come to mind, the forefront that you've also probably seen in the media as well are zinc, vitamin D, but also things like our B vitamins are important. Some of their minerals, other minerals like copper and selenium. Omega-3 fatty acids is another great anti-inflammatory compound that's important for our immune system. So it's not just one thing. It's definitely a whole complement of micronutrients that are going to be important in terms of maintaining that immune system. With the autoimmunity question, the jury's a little bit out. One, we don't really fully understand the triggers and the development of autoimmunity. We know it's where systems attack self. So in terms of micronutrients, there isn't as much literature in terms of stopping that self-attack, but there is potentially a role of the micronutrients in terms of limiting the consequences of that attack, because a lot of it has to do with pro-inflammatory activation. And many of these micronutrients, because of their anti-inflammatory activity, may be able to blunt some of that response. But to be able to totally stop the autoimmune response, there's not a lot of literature in terms of the role of micronutrients, at least.
I'm going to transition into the men and multivitamin study and some associated questions with that. First of all, we show that you're kind of showing blood nutrient levels. Actually, you mentioned it also in the other studies as well. But is there a good source for people to get that kind of information if they're interested, or is it more research based at this point?
So yes and no. So there, if you go to your doctor and you're worried about specific micronutrients, there are definitely some micronutrients that you can ask for a test for. Vitamin D is one in terms of detecting deficiencies. Iron is another one where there's a whole panel where you can look at potentially your levels. But for a lot of these
speaking of the minerals, at least, there isn't a great blood test that is available in the clinic to really look at your levels, which again is kind of one of our rationales for, because there isn't a great way to detect it until you're really bad, to take a multivitamin, multimineral as kind of some of that insurance. It's definitely not going to hurt you, and it may help a lot. But a lot of the blood biomarkers, again, are not terribly sensitive or specific, and are more used in research rather than a clinical test to help guide your diet, unfortunately.
And I often tell people, especially when they ask me about vitamin C testing, that most clinical labs nowadays, not research-based, but medical labs, don't do a very good job with vitamin C testing. So you're probably going to get a bad answer, even if you do get it tested. So is along the same lines, is there any way that, you showed some effects of the multivitamins on mitochondrial function? Is there any way that people can actually test that at home, or is this kind of a research-based
Yeah, at the moment, it is more of a research-based assay. There's definitely been talk in the research field in terms of standardizing these assays a little bit more to be able to use as screening for function, healthy aging, and that type of thing. But at the moment, it is more research-based. It's not a test that you can ask your doctor to do.
And there was one more question about, and I'm going to answer this one really quickly. Someone asked if we measured the cellular levels of vitamins and minerals in the multivitamin trial, and we did not, mainly because just we have to draw the lines on the study somewhere, and we actually ran out of white blood cells in that study, so we couldn't do the measurements. We wanted to, but we could not. All right, let's talk about supplement brands in a very general sense. What do you recommend when someone's looking for a quality supplement? Like, what should they be looking for? How do they decide?
We get this question a lot. The first thing to note is that you want to make sure that the supplements are third-party verified in terms of at least what they say on the label is actually what's in the bottle. So there's things, NSF or USP are kind of the three-letter third-party accreditators, for lack of a better word, that you want to look for in terms of a high-quality product. The other thing that you want to kind of look at is, especially if you're looking at those foundations for healthy aging, you want to make sure that multivitamin has those micronutrients in it. There's a lot of variation in terms of what's in a multivitamin, multimineral, and there are definitely ones that don't have the full complement. I know I've talked to this to my students that my husband has gone out to get multivitamins for us before, and he has dared to come back with ones without zinc in them, and that did not go by well in terms of trust in getting multivitamins for the family. So need to read the labels. Look at content, try to find the ones that have closer to the daily value as possible. There's very few that have 100% of all of them, but there's definitely some that have higher levels or closer to that daily value than others.
And so can you speak to, like, in general, like what I mean, I guess you touched on it just now, is that in our multivitamins, our recommendation for the Linus Pauling Institute is trying to get to that 100% level, at least with the combination of food you eat and the multivitamins. Right. The multivitamin intake is 100% of the RDA for most vitamins and minerals. Obviously, we can't do things like potassium, as we mentioned. So there's a lot of questions that are coming through on things like acetylcarnitine, lipoic acid, age-associated factors that are not micronutrients. And I think if people are very interested in hearing updates on those, we should try to get Dr. Hagen back for a future webinar. I guess we could do a quick question about, like, forms of vitamins or forms of it. Do you have any specific recommendations on whole food supplements on different forms of minerals. I know there was a question on different forms of zinc that you could probably give us some information on. Are there different formulations that people should be paying attention to, or does it matter that much?
Yeah, to be honest, my opinion is it doesn't matter that much. I'd rather you consume these micronutrients, the combination of food and a multivitamin, multimineral. Relative to the zinc question, there are lots of different forms of zinc, inorganic forms that are often salts like zinc gluconate, zinc sulfates, and then there are organic forms and some chelated forms as well. There are differences in terms of potency of bioavailability or absorption of each form. But to be honest, it's relatively small in terms of those differences. So again, I'd rather make sure that you're getting it rather than worry about the form.
And I'm going to back up again because obviously the questions are
coming by fast and furious.
Lots of different topics, yeah. So the role of weight. Should people who are overweight, larger individuals, worry about getting more micronutrients? How much information do we have there? And then there's also another question about people who are trying to lose weight. Is there, do we have to worry about not getting enough as we're reducing calories? Do we have to worry about micronutrients there, or obesity medications that are now coming out where people are eating less, and then you could tangent that into older adults who tend to eat less as well?
I guess the bottom line is wherever you're at, taking a multivitamin, multimineral is probably not a bad idea. It's not going to hurt and it may help. The question in terms of, if you're reducing your calories, there's, I guess, it really depends on how you're doing that. There's definitely a way to reduce your calories and maintaining a high quality diet. A lot of people who are overweight tend to consume high calorie, low quality diet. So empty calories, basically. So just reducing your intake may not have any impact on your micronutrient content. With that said, though, there is a little bit of controversy in terms of, especially with obesity, whether or not your ability to absorb some of these micronutrients could be impaired, especially some of the fat-soluble nutrients like vitamin D, for example, that there's some thought that the vitamin D may get sequestered in terms of lipid or fat depots within your body as well. So you may need a little bit more vitamin D. But again, the bottom line is, no matter where you are, you need to make sure that you're getting enough micronutrients, and taking a standard multivitamin, multimineral is good insurance to ensure that you are overcoming some potential shortfalls, however they may be arrived at, whether or not it's from dieting, getting older, that type of thing.
So I think I'm going to have to call it there for sake of time. We're at noon right now. I'm going to mention, though, there was a lot of specific questions on different vitamins: vitamin E, vitamin C, vitamin D. I would encourage everybody to look at our other webinars on this topic. Dr. Anitra Carr was just here in February talking about vitamin C and the effects of obesity, just as we were talking about on vitamin C intake and absorption. Dr. Fritz Gombart was talking about vitamin D last year, and we're hoping to bring him back again soon. Marit Traber was talking about vitamin E and the different forms of vitamin E. So the questioner who asked about the different forms of vitamin E, I'm going to point you to that webinar, and we'll send some of these links out to everybody after we're done here. Thank you, Emily, for coming on and tackling this topic. We had a lot more questions than we always do than we could answer today, and I just want to thank everybody for showing up and participating. Certainly, email me. You've got my email address as part of this webinar, or the LPI at OregonState.edu for additional questions, and I will try to get you 2 answers. And as we draw this to a close, Emily, do you have any further messages for our audience?
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone for being here. Definitely check out all the resources that we have at the Institute. We could obviously talk for hours about these topics, but there's webinars, there's our newsletters, the Micronutrient Information Center. But at the same time, if you are benefiting from these resources, I kindly ask you to consider donating to the Institute. Either to support our research or these outreach programs that we have as well. These programs are primarily funded by your generosity. So first off, thank you. I know many in the audience are people who have previously donated. So we thank you from our bottom of our hearts. We really couldn't be able to do some of this cutting edge research and connect you with experts in the field without your support. So if you'd like to give, you'll see here, there's a link to our giving page that I think we'll put out in the chat. You can find it on our website as well. But bottom line, thank you for joining us today. Hopefully our newsletter will hit your mailboxes like momentarily, very, very, very soon. We're also looking at scheduling our webinars for 2024. But as I mentioned, keep an eye out, especially for our Linus Pauling Day, February 28th, celebration of Dr. Pauling's birthday. And bottom line, if you have questions, contact us and be sure to keep in touch. Want to share ask everyone to have a happy holidays, stay well, and we will see you in the new year.
See you next year, everybody. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.